Hello and welcome to the UMC webinar series. Today, we're so excited to be joined by our guest, Debi Gilmore. I'm Alexis LeBaron, the UMC program coordinator, and we're here and excited to promote 25 years of marriage celebrations. A big part of the marriage celebrations that we do is this webinar series. And so we're so grateful for all of the people who are willing to participate in this, including our speakers and you, all of our listeners as well. Like I said, today we're going to be joined by Debi Gilmore, who's going to talk about the practical steps couples can take to heal from an attachment injury. Sorry, I paused there for a second. I don't know what happened. I lost reception, but I'm back. And Debi is the co-owner of the EFT Counseling and Education Center, a mental health clinic with 3 locations around the state of Utah, specializing in marriage and family therapy. She's a therapist, clinical trainer, author, and public speaker. Dr. Gilmore is a frequent presenter and keynote speaker at professional conferences and special events for the general public. She achieved her doctorate in marriage and family therapy, and a doctoral dissertation was a relationship education program that is now being taught and used by therapists and religious leaders across the world. She and her husband, Kirk, live in Washington, Utah. They've been married almost 45 years, and together they have 3 children and 9 grandchildren, and their first great-grandchild born this September. Have they already been born?
Yes. Oh, yes. This is so exciting for us, to be a great grandmother. Yeah. I mean, that little girl coming into the world, making me a great, that's pretty exciting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. That's so exciting. If you have any questions for Debi throughout her presentation, the chat will be turned off. So really the best place to ask questions is to the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of her 40-minute presentation, so write down your questions and save them for the end. If you've joined us for the CEU credit today, make sure to stay on until the end of the presentation. The survey needed for your credit will automatically load onto the screen, and then you'll receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certificate. You may also email into the Utah Marriage Commission at marriagecommission@usu.edu to receive your survey on this webinar. Once the survey is completed, you'll obtain an email with your CEU credit certification. We'll now turn the time over to Debi for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I appreciate the warm welcome and the opportunity to be here and talk about something that I have a passion for. I realized when I was invited to do this webinar that I actually chose one of the most difficult topics to talk about, but the question might be why? Why did I choose this topic about healing attachment injuries? It's because most of the couples, if not all, have suffered some sort of wound to their relationship. And most couples get discouraged, they lose hope, they don't know how to heal, how to help each other heal, and it can become a barrier to closeness and the ability to find that fulfilling, stable relationship that everyone longs for. The other thing that I wanted to share, which we're finding through research, that couples will ask me, should we focus on the children? Should they be a priority, or should we focus on each other? And research is telling us that if you, as a couple, focus on each other and prioritize your health and stability, your children will thrive. They learn by observation. As you focus on each other and you demonstrate how to help each other heal, those children will learn from you and will find that security. So here's some questions to consider. First, do you and your partner find that no matter what the conflict is, when you're in distress, the same old wound keeps showing up? And it seems to get in the way. You just can't seem to get by it. Or maybe you've been told that you're unforgiving and that you just need to let these things go. Maybe the two of you in your relationship realize there is an attachment injury, and every time you try to work through it, You stumble and fall all over each other, and it just doesn't go well. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about how to help each other heal. You're likely, if you answered, yeah, that sounds familiar, you're suffering from what we call an attachment injury. And if unaddressed, typically if it's pushed aside, if one partner says, oh, it's not such a big deal, just can you get over it? Can we get beyond that? It doesn't just go away. It actually gets bigger. It becomes a larger ache and a block for being able to find emotional safety and to be able to navigate the other storms of life. It's in the way. So, if you've ever been in a relationship, you have been hurt. That's pretty obvious, but think of it this way. If you have ever been in a relationship, you have hurt someone. That's part of being human. And so that's important to bring up because tonight I'm going to be talking to not only the hurt partner, the one that has the injury, but I'm also going to be talking to the offending partner. And I use that term not to say that you're offensive, but to say the one that made the mistake. I've got to designate between the two because both partners are so important in this repair process. So if you'll please forgive me for using those terms, but they are important and hopefully you'll understand as we go through this. Let's talk about the power we have in our most important relationships. Dr. Susan Johnson, who is the founder of emotionally focused therapy and has done countless studies on attachment and bonding in adulthood, this is what she said about that power that we have over our partner. She said, for all of us, the person we love most in the world, the one who can send us soaring joyfully into space, is also the person who can send us crashing back to earth. All it takes is a slight turning away of the head or a flip, careless remark. There is no closeness without this sensitivity. Now that's interesting. I want to pause here and point out that she's suggesting sensitivity is an essential part of a healthy relationship between two committed people. Now she goes on to say, if our connection with our mate is safe and strong, we can deal with these moments of sensitivity. Indeed, we can use them to bring our partner even closer. But when we don't feel safe and connected, these moments are like a spark in a tinder forest. They set fire to the whole relationship. And I'm certain that there are those of you listening that this resonates with. You know that just in that flicker of a moment, you can be sent reeling. So our human experience is shaped and influenced by our relationships. Now that includes our parent-child relationships, our business relationships, friendships, and tonight we're talking about our committed relationships in marriage. In couples that have a secure attachment, when a hurt happens, they're able to navigate that hurt relatively well and quickly. But attachment injuries are different. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see these important slides. That I'm a visual learner and I'm also a visual teacher. So what I'd like to do is kind of give you an idea of the map. Where are we going tonight? Where will I be taking you? The difference between relational hurts and attachment injuries are essential to understand. So I'm going to give you an understanding of that dynamic of what is a hurt versus this wound. I'm also going to talk about how those attachment injuries can block your growth as a couple, can really block you from finding the strength and courage to face all the storms of life that most couples do face, all couples face. I'm going to talk about the essential roles of the hurt partner. There is a responsibility in their role in this repair. And I'm going to talk about the essential role of the offending partner, what's expected of them. And then I'm going to give you key steps toward healing, very practical steps that you can do without the help of a therapist. And then I'll kind of talk about the reasons why some people would want to have the help and the support of an expert. But tonight, these things that I'm sharing with you can be done as a couple in your own safe environment together. So before I go any further, this slide is probably the most important one of all. So when I get through the slide, I want you to take a picture of it, put it in your pocket. Remember these basic building blocks of security. It starts with acceptance. If you think about it, in any important relationship, we need to know that we are acceptable. When you walk into a crowded room at a party or some sort of gathering, every human needs to know that they have a place there, that when they walk into that room, they are acceptable in all their flaws and imperfections. And now as we refocus and think in your most important relationship with your sweetheart, do you have that level of acceptance to know that I have wiggle room to get it wrong, to be human? I also have the opportunity to seek to repair. And so if we can feel that level of acceptance, then we automatically have a sense of belonging. Then what happens is we feel like, I'm part of a whole. I know that in this humanness that I bring to this relationship, I belong. I can land next to my sweetheart and have that sense of security. Now, the next one, this is progressively more difficult. The question is, can you reach to your sweetheart for comfort when you need that level of comfort? Sometimes they're not available. So we have to be able to have a level of being able to self-soothe or reach to our dear friend. But ultimately, in that most important relationship, we need to know, if I reach to you, will you be there for me? And then finally, safety. We need to know that it's safe emotionally to reach for that comfort. Now, I really love the idea of acronyms. We text in acronyms, we even email in acronyms. So this is a really easy way to remember these building blocks of security: acceptance, belonging, comfort, and safety. So take a picture of this and remember these concepts as I share with you the rest of the information for tonight, because they play an important role. What's a relational hurt? Well, a relational hurt happens to couples. All couples experience a hurt, but they're different than an injury. And let me explain how they are different. For example, if you forgot a birthday, oops, or an anniversary, that's a big oops. But in couples who have a foundation of security, they've invested in this stability, they've had problems and they've been able to navigate those issues and help each other heal, they can recover quickly from that forgotten birthday, set a date, go celebrate. And the forgiveness is more readily available in those couples. And it's how they perceive it. Some people would see that as a terrific injury, a trauma. But the majority of couples can see these events as something that you can repair. A blow-up fight. I mean, that's why the cliche make-up sex was developed, because you know that when you have that blow-up fight, in couples that have a level of security, they can make up and figure it out together, holding hands, navigating that hurt. A misunderstanding. One shows up for lunch at noon and the other shows up at 12:45, misunderstanding the date time. And this misunderstanding or miscommunication can be healed fairly swiftly. Or a disagreement. Every couple is going to have differences. So these are the things that we term a relational hurt. But now let's turn toward attachment injuries. This is important to understand that these injuries are a significant trauma to the relationship. I like to help people understand what trauma means. A trauma, the word from the Latin word to wound, that's what that means in Latin. And the injury comes from the Latin word that means to wrong. So an injury is a wound to the heart, a wound to the relationship, and is significant enough that it now becomes a measure of security when it happens. So let me give you some examples so you can kind of decide, does this apply to me? For example, a new bride is inadvertently left out of a family photo that the mother-in-law is taking. Her husband doesn't stop to suggest, wait, she's not in there. This occurs just after the wedding, and this new bride is still trying to find her place in the family. She might see this as an intentional rejection of her. She might be hurt deeply. And if not addressed, if she's told, oh, it doesn't matter, you just need to get over it, that incident can dramatically alter the security in the development of that new relationship. But let me give you some other examples of attachment injuries. The birth of a child. Here's an example of one years ago when I was working with a couple. The wife went into premature labor and her husband was across the country on a business trip. He was unable to get a flight in time to get home to be by her side in this very disturbing delivery of a premature infant. And so the wife then has a lot to heal from. Her dream is shattered because she longed to have him there with her, needing his comfort. He couldn't get there, of course. It wasn't his intent to not be there, but he might discount it, not wanting to talk about it. Can we just move on? And that can become an injury. A cancer diagnosis. Maybe the couple goes together and it's revealed to the one who has cancer, and the other deals with it by shutting down, not being able to deal with it openly. And that's received by the other as a rejection. They're left alone to deal with the aftermath and the fears that go with a cancer diagnosis. Another example is a miscarriage or death of a child, which is terrible. And some people deal with it openly. Some people want to talk through it and really work through openly, but others might shut down, and the partner might see that as a rejection. A unilateral decision. I see this often in a financial decision that's made by one or the other without them conversing about it. And then they find out later, and it feels like a betrayal. It is a betrayal of their promises to each other to be involved in everything. And of course, an emotional or sexual affair is an attachment injury, a trauma to the relationship that is significant enough that it needs to be dealt with. And in this case, often these types of betrayals need to be assisted with an expert, a marriage and family therapist, or someone who has expertise in being able to help the couple heal. It requires a lot of support. So Dr. Sue Johnson, again, has, in her research, she describes an attachment injury as it's a betrayal, an abandonment of trust during a critical moment of need. And, you know, as you think about this, how it's experienced, an attachment injury characterized by the abandonment or betrayal of their person, it defines the relationship. It's a critical moment of need. The relationship is now insecure, and it maintains the relationship distress if not addressed, and then used as a standard for dependability of the offending partner. So it's critical that you help each other heal. So I think it's useful to explore the world, the internal world of the injured partner. And we're going to do this with the offending partner as well. But this cycle of disconnection, the negative cycle that happens in our trying to cope on our own with this injury, here's what it looks like. So, of course, we all need these 4 building blocks of security: acceptance, belonging, comfort, and safety. The injury happens, it's revealed. And in that revelation or that experience of the injury, you can see that these needs are not accessible now. The broken trust causes us to have a negative view of ourselves. We might tell ourselves, I must not be lovable. My partner doesn't care about me. They don't want to help me heal. I feel like a fool. I seem to be so unforgiving, but I don't know what to do with this wound in my heart. So the negative view of self also happens, the negative view of the partner. And so in that coping with that hurt, the shock or the trauma to the relationship, we deal with it 3 different ways. And if you think about it for a minute, I want you to imagine when you've been through an experience of hurt, how did you handle it? Did you want to fight through and pursue for the repair and talk about it and try to make sense of it? Maybe you withdrew, shut down physically or emotionally, just went away and couldn't deal with it openly. You might withdraw. Others freeze. They're paralyzed, don't know what to do with that hurt and the shock and the trauma, and freeze in place. Again, it's sort of a withdrawal, but you're present, but not. And so here's the problem. The needs that we identified for security can't be met because we can't reach. Instead, the alarm goes off and says, uh-oh, now who do I have? What do I do? My person hurt me and my person isn't available to me. And so now I bounce off into what we typically see is chronic anxiety might be happening, or chronic depression, or addictions to cope with the pain. Now you'll notice that I've got divorce listed here. That doesn't necessarily mean legal divorce. We so often see couples that push aside an attachment injury, are not able to handle it and learn how to repair. They end up emotionally divorcing. They might stay together, but they stay together for the kids. And so this hurt goes unaddressed. So now I want to share with you the world of the offending partner. What happens internally for them? This is something that most often we don't really talk about. We talk about addressing the hurt partner's feelings and their needs, but it's useful to explore what happens for the one who made the mistake. So let's start with, of course, they have those basic building blocks of security needs as well. But the injury is revealed. The betrayal happens. Now, here's where it's different. Shame becomes, we see this all the time. What human wants to admit that they made a mistake and that they deeply hurt their partner? So shame causes us to not want to talk about it, not want to look at it or be reminded that it happened. And so that negative view of self occurs. That's what happened with the hurt partner, but the negative view of self happens for the offending partner as well. And negative view of their partner, because it keeps coming up. So with this comes the way that they cope typically would be denial, defending themselves. And here's those 3 ways of coping: either fighting for the repair, or freezing in place, or withdrawing and shutting down and completely going away. So here's where it matches up with the injured partner. The needs are not met. The alarm goes off. They're blocked from getting what they need, and away they go into that territory of mental health issues, because the hurt directly impacts not only our emotional health, but our physical health. And so this actually explains addiction. And of course, that possible divorce, whether it's legal or emotional. So this is why it's so concerning if a couple doesn't know how to repair. So here's what I gave you the bad news. Now I'm going to give you the good news. Where do you go with this? If it's so damaging to not address the hurt, then let's talk about what you can do. And first, it's important to recognize what are the key elements. Now, these are not the steps, but these are the states of being that need to occur as you decide, do we want to commit to this? Well, there has to be a couple commitment to recovery and repair. If you think about signing up to go jump out of an airplane, you're both going to go on this trip to parachute out of an airplane. To me, it sounds ridiculous. I would never do that. But if you're going to commit to do something, you need to commit to get in the plane, putting on the parachute, jumping out of the plane, pulling open the parachute, and navigating all that scary but exhilarating feeling to the ground. In this case, these key elements to successful repair require a commitment to go through all the steps. And if you do, there are tremendous rewards. Next, there has to be a willingness to have honesty and transparency on both parts. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a minute when I share with you the steps. There needs to be, from both partners, genuine empathy and compassion. Now, that's not just one way. There needs to be empathy for that hurt, injured partner. There also has to be compassion for how hard it is for the offending partner to stay with this and to find the courage and patience and strength to be able to navigate these steps that are not easy. Then both partners need to be able to identify the weak areas in the relationship. Every marriage has them. Even the healthiest, the strongest couples have weaknesses. And so this is what we would consider preventative medicine as you navigate through the steps, then examining what can we do to prevent this from happening again. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the patience and consistency in rebuilding trust, because trust has been shattered. There's not an expectation of trust being able to occur for a minute, for a time. And we'll talk about how long, typically. So in this process, these steps toward repair, there is a principle called ARE. We use this a lot in emotionally focused therapy, but it's a useful principle for any couple, young, old, new relationship, old relationship. To be accessible to our partner means, in this repair process, setting aside our phone, turning away from the computer or any other distractions, creating a safe environment of privacy to be able to work through these steps, to be able to say to our partner, I'm here for you. I'm here because you matter. Responsiveness means to reflect what we're hearing to each other. This goes both ways. To be able to respond with interest, to say, I do want to know what this was like for you. I'm ready to hear from your eyes, from your heart, what this was like for you. And to be engaged in this means we stay with it for as long as it takes. To be able to say, do you feel like I've been there for you? Can you feel my presence? Is there more? That is the principle of ARE. So let's go to the steps. Step one, the hurt partner has to be able to share their painful story. That's the narrative. And this means not with criticism and attacks. This means from the hurt place. This means the significance of the event on the relationship. So you can see if it happens this way, there is less shame for the partner for the one who made the mistake. Instead, it's from the pain inside their person. So if you can avoid attacks and criticism, it's more likely that the offending partner will be able to stay in this process. So again, focusing on the significance on the relationship, not necessarily the event. And that's what has been uncovered in the research about healing attachment injuries. Typically, couples get stuck in saying, but you did this and you did that and you didn't do this. Instead, it hurt me so deeply. And I wondered, now what do I do? My partner's not there for me. Will this happen again? Can I count on them? We're examining the wound just like a doctor would when you go into the emergency room and they have to scrape away the rocks and the dirt to find out how severe is the damage. How many stitches will it take? And the doctor and you have to be willing to go through the pain of that examining the wound. Now, in this step one, the offending partner has to muster up all the courage and patience and strength to be able to exercise ARE, accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. I'm here for you. I do want to understand. And I want to pause here and acknowledge how difficult this step is. This is a launch into really difficult territory. And so knowing that, the hurt partner has to recognize that this is a sacrifice that the offending partner is offering to them, to be able to go through this willingly, to hear about what happened and the impact. And shame blocks that patience. So the offending partner's role in this is to stay out of shame. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, oops, I made a mistake. It was a big one and it hurt my sweetheart, but that's not who I am. And that's where this gets hard. But if you can get through step one, the best is left for the next few steps. So making sense of the injury in step two, that means being able to ask questions. These questions to fill in the blanks, to be able to say, how did this happen? What were you thinking? And can you help me understand some of the details? Now, if it's a sexual affair, there is TMI. And that's why I suggest with a therapist, it might be wise to have someone navigating this so that the questions that are asked are useful and helpful. But let me share with you some statistics surrounding this. This is research that tells us the survival rates following any type of betrayal. If the offending partner refused to answer questions, 59% of those survived. That means maybe they survived, but they were emotionally divorced or shut down. There was a block. But those who were willing to answer questions, 86% of those survived and went on to thrive. That's important to know because those questions are not easy to answer, but if you understand the power of being open to answering those questions, the transparency and openness is essential in the process of rebuilding trust. So, step three, courage and willingness on the hurt partner's part to be able to talk about the significance of the injury. Now, this is different than the narrative in step one. This means being able to say, I thought you were my person, the one that I could reach to when I need help. I thought you were my best friend. Now I wonder, but I want you to be my best friend. This is where we start to establish this foundation of where are we headed? Well, in most of the couples that I work with, when they are navigating these steps, this moment here is where the offending partner starts to feel hope. Oh, you want me to be your best friend? Well, of course, but it's difficult. I can't trust you right now. But that's the significance of why this hit me so hard. And in this step 3, if you can do this, what happens is this is preventative medicine. It establishes the significance of this event and why it's so important to prepare for the future and not have it happen again. Now, healthy couples acknowledge each other's efforts. Healthy couples openly and frequently will praise each other. In fact, it's pretty powerful when you're in a group of people and you hear your partner say something positive about you to the others. And this step 4 is similar to that. In this process, to be able to pause and say, I can see that you're trying to help me. I feel you're there for me. I feel like you care. I have felt so alone. But your willingness to talk through this now, this is new. This feels so meaningful to me. Thank you for being there. And that might be difficult for the one who's been hurt, because that hurt can be pretty acute. But if you can remember that the offending partner needs this dose of encouragement to stay with it. Now, let me pause. There is a step 5, but I want to go through the rewards. Why would you want to do this? Why is this important? Well, first, shame becomes replaced by increased hope and confidence. If you can navigate these steps slowly and intentionally, shame slips away. And that's incredible for someone who's carried shame for a long time. The hurt partner now can access these needs. And for that matter, the offending partner begins to feel that as well. Both partners become more emotionally engaged. They learn this through the process. The consistency teaches them we're in this together. The offending partner, this part's significant. Forgiving self is probably the most difficult part. In this long-term process, I see couples struggle most with the shame that blocks being able to forgive self. And then each begins to reap the rewards of consistency. Consistency in an intentional marriage is key. With this consistent connection, and I'm not suggesting these steps are all done in one night. I'm suggesting that you do these steps over a period of time. You now might say to me, how long? And I'm going to tell you it can take up to 18 months to a year for severe betrayal. But all along the way, there are rewards, rich rewards, in this encouragement and the efforts, the struggle, and the adaptation to the new relationship. So here's step 5. And I love this one. This is my favorite. I call it the time machine moment. What this means is, what would it be like if now, in your wisdom of going through all these steps, and both of you have learned more about each other, you now understand the significance of the impact of this injury. What would it be like if a time machine showed up in your living room and you could both step in and being given that opportunity to not rewrite the incident? It happened. But now what would you do immediately in the aftermath of that incident, that injury? It's the opportunity to offer comfort, compassion, understanding through this new understanding of each other's pain. If I could go back to that moment, I wouldn't push your pain aside. I would be there for you, because now I understand that I'm important to you and our relationship is important to you. And now I understand the power I have to help you heal. So now this is an overview of what we've talked about, just kind of a recap of all these steps in a visual. There's those needs again. They are in any important relationship. We need to find those. The injury happens. We're blocked from being able to access those things. Healing phase 1, full disclosure, transparency, recommitment to each other. We're going to work through this. Next is openly processing the impact, the significance on the relationship, the broken trust, the grief and loss, being able to do that freely. Now, the vulnerability without attacks. The hurt partner has to be able to find the soft place of pain. And that's because the offending partner says, I'm here for you. It's okay. The freedom to ask questions. Behavior change has to occur. Now, an understanding of the power and the impact of that injury. But notice something. This is where it shifts. This is where the change occurs. Notice that the block to those needs lifts in about this phase 5. New insight and understanding opens up all kinds of possibilities. Now, they start to explore the offender's reasons for committing to the healing. Why would you stay in this with me? Then the offending partner gets to say, because I do love you. I do care about you. The rewards, new connection, healing, strength, higher self-worth. That does happen in this process, and hopefully forgiveness. And it is a new relationship. So I do want to end with one more slide. The complicated process of forgiveness. Forgiveness has to be a part of any important relationship, but I'm not suggesting that it has to show up in a certain timeline. I love this quote by Khalid Hosseini, suggesting that sometimes forgiveness just shows up. He said, I wondered if that was how forgiveness budded, not with the fanfare of epiphany, but with pain, gathering its things, packing up and slipping away unannounced in the middle of the night. That's how I teach couples to approach forgiveness. Keep a place in your heart, a space that's available for when it happens, because there's no have-tos. Forgiveness isn't a have-to, but if you go through these steps, forgiveness is possible for both parties. So I hope, Alexis, that you're ready to jump back in again. This is at the point where I would love to answer questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I love that last quote you shared.
I do too. And I just happened on it recently. And I was like, yes, that's what I've been trying to teach my
Perfect.
couples and myself. I just couldn't explain it. How do we get to forgiveness? It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like to be able to say, it's not expected today. So
I love that. Yeah. So our first question is, what is the timeline for treatment of couples with infidelity?
Okay, that is such a great question. And people get discouraged when I tell them it can take 18 months to 2 years. And I'll tell you why I say that way. It needs to be an intentional process, and there are phases. With infidelity, it is the greatest impact on the relationship. It really does injure the person. And so if you think about grief, it's a process of grief. Grief goes in stages. And typically what I'll see is the shock and the denial might be for the first 6 months. But the beauty of working with those couples in those first 6 months is exploring possibilities, being able to recommit and saying, and I do a lot of psychoeducation with the partner, the offending partner. I have to help them understand, look, your part in this 6 months or whatever it takes to get through the initial stage of denial and shock, just be strong. Because I promise you that in the next phase of your healing, you will find relief. It will get better. So grief is denial, and then might be some anger, yeah, and maybe a little bit of sadness and depression, and that process is, you think about it, you can't tell someone, okay, you're done being angry now. And so you have to allow that to happen. The sadness comes, and then finally acceptance, 18 months to 2 years. And I hope that made sense to whoever had asked that question. Thank you.
Perfect. Our next question is, how do I overcome this without a therapist as a mediator?
Yeah, and you know, the steps that I gave tonight are without a mediator. And so if you follow each of these steps methodically, intentionally, and if each of you remember, the first step was commitment to the repair. That means you got to get in the plane, you got to take off and get up into the sky. And when you're in the sky, you have to stay with it, even when that's scary. Even when you say to yourself, what was I thinking? When it gets hard, you have to be able to say, no, I'm staying with this. If you can do that, you don't need a therapist to help you. But then I'm going to qualify that by saying, if you get to this point where you really need that support and what I call scaffolding with a therapist, it is so helpful. We have so much research that teaches therapists how to hold the hands and the hearts of couples going through this. But I'm just going to tell you, you don't necessarily have to have the help of a therapist. Do this and do it slowly, having patience and compassion for each other. You can do it. And it's no different than these steps. These steps that I offered tonight are based on the research on how to heal from infidelity, actually.
Our next question is, if the offending partner is not willing to fully commit to the process, can the marriage be saved?
You know, that's a really painful experience when there's one who longs to heal the marriage and the other is unwilling. Even as a therapist, I don't have a lot of traction for an unwillingness to work through it. But here's how I handle that. If they were in my office, I would ask the one who's unwilling. I might see them as in so much pain that it makes sense that right now they're unwilling to work through it. And I might suggest to them, while you're in this acute phase of pain, don't make a decision, but also offer yourself compassion. It does hurt. You may not want to repair it now. But I might ask them, what percent of you wants to repair? Is there a percent of you? And they might tell me 1% out of 99. And I say to them, wow, that 1%, that's a lot, actually. I've seen couples heal. Give yourself time. But to the partner who has an unwilling partner, I say to them, I can't promise that that relationship will heal. It takes two. It takes two people committed. And again, I want to reinforce that was the first key principle. There has to be commitment for both. And then also to talk about the hurt that happens with one who's left alone to deal with it. Let me just talk about that. You have to have circled wagons around you. You cannot navigate the pain alone. So if you have a partner who has checked out and decided that they're not able or willing, you've got to find support from someone, and I say a trusted other. And that's really unfortunate, but I'll tell you what, I have the majority of the couples that I work with who've had some sort of attachment injury, the majority commit to work through it. It's a pretty great statistic.
I love that. That leads really perfectly actually into our next question, which is, how can I help members of my family overcome attachment injury without being in the trauma or too deep in the trauma or seeming to pick sides?
Okay. So I'm understanding the question to be they're recognizing someone has experienced an attachment injury and they're seeing it from a distance, wanting to be a comfort, but not wanting to be too enmeshed. I'm guessing that's the question.
That's what I got from it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so what I usually tell people is the two that experience the injury together, the one who hurt the other, has the most power to help the other heal. We can be a support to someone who has suffered. We can be there and express empathy, which is I see that you're suffering, and I'm so sad for the impact that it has on you. I'm here for you. I don't have answers, but I want you to know that I love you. So that is the most healthiest way to handle it. But to jump in and try to give advice or counsel, nah, that's not helpful. And I always tell people, when a couple, for example, has been through an injury like that, don't go out and take polls from your family members. The one that needs to address this with you is your partner, and if needed, the support of an expert. So again, to review what I just said, express empathy and compassion and support by being there, acknowledging their suffering.
I love that. Our next question is, how do I identify what needs I have that aren't being met by my partner?
Oh, that's wonderful. I love this question because this is part of what I do initially with anyone when I'm working with them. We want to identify what is your base need in your most important relationships. When it's missing, what is it and how do you feel? But first, what do you need most? And so, Alexis, I might ask you that question. In your most important relationship with your sweetheart, what do you need most? Can you tell me?
Yeah, I think for me, I need quality time as well as like depth and quality time. So being able to like have conversations and not just like watching a movie or things like that.
And when you get that quality time, it tells you what? What does it tell you about you and your partner that
It
you
makes
matter?
me, yeah, it makes me feel more connected to him, as well as it shows me that he loves me enough to kind of give me that gift in a way.
There you go. He cares about me. There's your base need. I need to know that I matter. And the way he shows me is quality time. So your base need is, I need to know I'm important. Some people might say, I need to know that I have wiggle room to get it wrong, that forgiveness is available to, I need to know that I can be human in myself and still be acceptable. I need to know that I'm a priority, that you choose me first. So, how do you know? Well, investigate those moments when you're in a lot of pain. What's missing? That's when you'll identify your base need.
I love that exercise. Thanks for doing that with me.
You bet. I put you on the spot, Alexis. Sorry.
I know. You always can. Um, our next question is it better for the offending partner to admit they made a mistake before they're ready to process it?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. Should they? Can they? That's my question, is can they admit? Both parties know that something happened, an injury happened. And so even if the one who made the mistake can't admit and I'm not sure, I want clarification. Is this where there's been maybe an affair that hasn't been disclosed, or they both know it happened, but they just can't talk about it yet? Is that the question? Can you read the question again?
Yeah, the question just says, I hopefully they provide something, but it says, is it better for the offending partner to admit they made a mistake before they're ready to process it?
Okay. Yes. Yes. And I'll tell you why that's so essential. Is if it's found out by the hurt partner, if they investigate or somehow it falls into their lap, that does not rebuild trust. That creates even worse fear. Like, oh, is there more? If the offending partner can own it, which I'm going to acknowledge is one of the most difficult things we have to do as humans, admit we made an error, and in this case, a big one. If they can own that, that is a rapid leap into healing. And so I'm going to say it takes a tremendous level of courage for that offending partner to do that, which I would say you are a superhero if you can admit your mistake, own it, and then walk into the repair. So that's such a great question. I love that they asked that, and I hope that I answered it the way they were needing me to answer it.
They didn't provide any clarification, so we're going to assume that they did.
Good.
I love that. Um, The next one is, what if my partners won't identify their weaknesses and always pushes back on me?
Yeah, and that's perpetuating the injury. And that's what we talked about initially. If it's pushed aside, if it's continually denied or the blame is cast on the other, that just makes the injury worse. So, and really, I see that when I'm looking into the world of the offending partner, it's shame talking. It's them not being able to own. It's this level of insecurity inside, but it's not helpful. And so their journey needs to be to find the courage to be able to identify their weaknesses. That's a higher law of a relationship, really. If you look at it, it's a higher law of being human to be able to say, I made a mistake, Alexis, and I'm really profoundly regretting that I made that mistake. I don't like doing that. But if I can understand the benefits to owning my mistakes and knowing that the result will be even richer relationships than I ever had before, that's the benefit and that's the promise. That's what I see when couples are able to do this.
I love that. We'll just do one last question, which is, what does being consistent in this process look like?
All right. Well, I could demonstrate by inconsistency. It would be going up in the airplane saying, nope, never mind, let's go back down again. Inconsistency would be allowing the partner that's been hurt to talk through it and ask questions, the next time refusing to answer questions. Consistency would be, I'm here for you. Oh, is it bubbling up again? I'm here for you. If you need to talk through it, I'm here for you. So remember the concept of ARE, accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. If you can apply that principle every day, you will be a better person and you will have a richer marriage.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. Where can people that have participated in this and people that will participate in the future find more about you and your resources?
Thank you for asking that question. I would love to share with you the ways to get me. I am on the internet in all these, you can reach at info@eftcounseling.org. EFTcounseling.org is our website. And also I do have my own website, drdebigilmore.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, which will give you a monthly overview of concepts of relationships. So I hope that you'll visit my websites and ask for more.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. We'll make sure to include those in the show notes, as well as her Instagram page, which is actually how we connected originally.
Yes. Glad you did, Alexis. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us in this webinar. We're so grateful for your questions and participation tonight. Once again, if you attended this webinar for the CEU credit, make sure to stay out until the end of the webinar for your survey. It will automatically load onto the screen, and then you'll get an email back from the UMC email for your survey. Also, if it doesn't load, you can email us at the UMC email, which is marriagecommission@usu.edu for your survey and certificate. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Debbie. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.